Hello everyone, welcome back to this object-oriented programming with Python series, and in this video we are going to learn that what are the types of methods in object-oriented programming using Python. So without further ado, let's just dive into this video. So when we talk about the types of methods in OOP, there are three common methods that we can think of. The first one is called instance method. The second one is called class method, and the third one is called static method. Now here we have to pay attention because when we talked about variables, we said that class and static variables are the same thing, but it's not the same in the case of methods. When we talk about methods, class methods and static methods are two different things. So always keep that in mind when we work with methods. Now we have subcategories or subtypes of instant methods, and they are called accessors and mutators. So we will go deep in the types of methods, and we will implement each of these methods one by one, and we'll understand that how these methods actually work when it comes to classes and objects. So just like every other video, we'll create a very simple class and we'll call it computer, and then inside it we will create an init function which is called a constructor, and inside this constructor we will just create a couple of variables. Let's say we are talking about computers, then again we'll take a RAM, and let's just take the values from the user while calling the objects, right? So in that case we will have to give variables here. So we can say RAM, we can say hard, and let's say we also say like keyboard. Okay, so we'll say the third entity is a keyboard. Okay, so for that when we will call RAM, we will use self.ram to store that value, and similarly for hard we will say self.hard. You can obviously you can assign any variable that you want. These are just random names, and we can say keyboards, and we assign it the value of keyboard, right? Let's say I create a method, and through this method I want to know the characteristics of my laptop, right? I want to see that how much RAM it has and how much hard it has. So for that we will create a method, and we'll say status, and we will use self like we use every time, and this time we will say the properties of my laptop are, and we can say self dot ram, and we can say self dot hard. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just go ahead and I will create an object called c1, and I will use computer parenthesis, and inside these parentheses I will give the values for these three variables that we just created. So I'll say my RAM is 512, my hard is 2000, and keyboard is yes. Let's say I will say yes. Okay, so what I will do, I'll just go ahead and I will just to test if this function is working, or if this method is working right or not. We'll just go ahead and we will write RAM c1 dot hard and c1 dot keyboard, right? So what we'll do, we'll just go ahead and save this program, and we will run this program. So here you can see the value of RAM and the value of hard and the value of keyboard has been printed out. Now we are talking about instance methods, right? So in the previous video we said, when we talked about instant variables, we said that the variables that are written inside this constructor are called instance variables. Okay, so right now what we have done so far is, first of all, we are talking about instance methods, right? Okay, if we reflect back to the previous video about types of variables, in that video we discussed about instance variables, and we said that every variable that we create inside this constructor is called instance variable, right? So every method that will use those instance variables will be called instance method. Like right now, in our status method, we are using self.ram and self.hard, and these variables are called instant variables, right? So because of this status method is called instance method. And you can also recognize instance methods by this self keyword. Every method that will have self keyword in it will be called instance methods, right? So first of all, now we know that what are instance methods, but we also have to understand that what are accesses and what are mutators, right? And these are the subtypes of instance methods. So accesses, as its name suggests, these are the method that access things, that get things, right? So for example, if I'll just go ahead and I will write, let's say, define get ramp. Let's say I create this variable and I will use this self, and I will write print. I'll say the RAM of my laptop is, and I will say self.ram, right? Now in that case, when I will just go ahead and I will call my object, and I will, from that object I will call get RAM, and I will save this file and I will run this program again. You can see the RAM of C1 has been printed out, right? So what this method actually did is accessed the value of this RAM of this C1 object, right? And now you can also see this self has been used in this method. So in a way it is still an instance method, but at the same time it's getting a value, and it's getting a value of RAM. So that is why we can also call it a getter, or we can also call it an accessor, right? And similarly we also have mutators. So mutator comes from the word mutation, and mutation means change. So the methods that can change the value of a certain variable or we should say a method that can change the value of an instance variable is called a mutator, right? So what we can do is we can just go ahead and we can say set RAM. We can also call these methods as setters. So again we will use this self, and because now we have to set a value, then that's why we have to get another value, and for that we have to write an argument here, right? So here we can say or we can say that self.ram is equal to this value, and then we can say print the RAM of my laptop, right? And here we can say self.ram, and when we will call this method, we will say c1.setRAM. Now here we will give the value because we added an argument here. So for example, I will just go ahead and I will write 4000 here, and I will save this file and will clear this prompt, and here I will run my program, and here you can see before the value of my RAM was 512, right? But then what I did, I called my set RAM, and through this method I changed the value of my RAM from 512 to 4000. So because it set a new value, that's why we can call this method as a setter, or we can also call it as a mutator. And you can see here we are again using this self keyword, and that's why it's still an instance method, right? So that's about it about instance methods, and we also discussed what are accessors and what are mutators. Now let's just move forward toward class methods, right? So in the previous video we talked about class variables, right? So those were the variables that were written outside this constructor and inside this class right about here. I mean, in short, the methods that will use instance variables will be called instance methods, and the methods that will use the class variables will be called class methods. So what I'll do, I'll just go ahead and I will create a class variable here. Let's say I will create a variable brand, just like in the previous video, and I will use this as del, right? So what we can do here is we can create a method that will use this class variable. So what we can write is we can say define, and we can say brand. This is the name of the method that we will create. And now here, instead of using self, we will write CLS. CLS represents class, right? So it makes, or it turns this method from instance method to class method. So what we'll do, we'll just go ahead and let's say I will write here the brand of my laptop is, and here we can say brand, right? And just like we use self.rem, here we have to use cls.rem. Okay, and what we will do, we'll just go here and I will say c1 dot brand, and I will call this, and I will save this file and I will run this program. Okay, so here we have this error here. So what we have to do is we have to feed this method or class, and just like in the previous video we understood this notation, right? We called our class, and from that class we called our method, and in this method we gave our object, right? So what this error is actually telling us is to do that for our class method, but we don't want to do that. We don't want to feed our class A between these parentheses. We want to write it just like this, right? So there's a way that we can use to avoid that previous notation, right? What we can do is we can just go here and use this at the rate, and here you can tell your program that whatever is under this notation or keyword that you're going to write, whatever there is, it is a class method. So you can just write here class method, right? So you can save this program, and hopefully when you run it, okay, so this is the error that this is the mistake that we are making. This brand is actually a class method, but we are using our object to call it. What we want to do is we want to write computer here. We want to write a class to call this class method. Now if we just save this program and run it, hopefully it will work. Okay, yeah, here this is the mistake. We actually use the same keyword for our method and same word for our variable. So we have to differentiate this because Python is getting confused at which one it has to consider, right? So we'll just change this method name from brand to branding, and we'll just change this again, and we will save it and we will run it. And here you can see your class variable has been printed out, which is del, right? So here goes our class method as well. Now we have a third type of the method, and which is called static method. So just to summarize whatever we have discussed until now is the first type of the method is instance method, and these are the methods that used instance variables. Then we had class methods, and these are the methods that used class variables. Now we have static methods. Now in the case of static methods, we don't use any kind of variables. We do not use instance variables, we do not use class variables, we do not use any kind of variables. These are the type of these are the type of methods that give you a static output. Let's say you have to print out something again and again in your program, and instead of just writing your print function and the statement again and again, you create a single method, and whenever you want that statement, you just call that function here. So in that case you use static methods. So let's just go ahead and create a static method. I'll just write here and I will say let's say I will say info. So here I can write print the laptop condition is good, right? So this what we have created here is called a static method, right? And just like class method, you also have to define your static method here. So you will write static method, right? This will create your info method into static method. Now whenever you want to call your method, you can just simply call it using your object. You can say c1.info, and I will save this program and I will run this program, and you can see that the laptop condition is good has been printed out. And here what you have to focus on is that we are using self keyword nor we are using CLC class keyword, right? So in the case of static methods, we do not use any kind of keywords here because we are not using any kind of variables here, right? We are not using instance variables or we are not using class variables. That's why these parentheses always stay empty. So that's about it regarding types of methods in OOP.